Hey everyone. So the workshop that we're going to be doing today is just talking about, contributing to an open source project and like what even is open source, how do you even contribute to it, what are some of the benefits, all that stuff is going to be found in this workshop. So just to start, a lot of the tools that we use as software developers come from the open source space, whether that is, VS Code, which is like code editor, IDE, or, programming languages that serve a lot of functions like Rust or React, all come from the open source and are actively being modified by people like us that are interested in computer science and like bettering the tools that we use. So what even is open source in the first place? So open source is a software that is like something that people can modify because of its design that is publicly accessible. So in other words, a source code of something like a collaborative project, a language, an app, a website, anything like that is going to be openly distributed so everyone can use it and modify it. And it's really interesting to be a part of like open source projects, no matter, what you do with them, mostly because the code that we use or the source code that we use for the products that we love aren't, publicly accessible, obviously, unless you work for the company itself. Then you could have access to the code base and make those changes. But open source projects allow that to be used publicly so everyone could use it. So why even use open source, or why even contribute to these projects that we're going to be, discussing? So open source software powers a lot of the tools that we use as developers, like I've shown you in the beginning, and it allows many people from like a lot of different backgrounds to, to say their perspectives and access to code base and like come up with better strategies for building software. It also allows you to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of technologies. And this is really useful when you're learning a lot of the standards of software engineering. So the things that you're going to be doing, accessing repositories, making edits to a code base, anything like that is something you're going to do day to day as a software engineer or a data analyst or anything like that within the tech industry. So contributing to open source is going to be really, really important. So there's obviously a lot of benefits to contributing, but the first thing people, bring up is like, why even should I like contribute to open source? I'm like writing code or I'm like contributing to a project and it's like free labor. Why am I going to do it? So the first one is like, it just has a lot of personal rewards, and the open source contributions, the benefits are intrinsic. And more specifically, things like having your name attached to a repository that's used by thousands of people, or offering your own unique solutions to these repositories is rewarding within and of itself. And this is going to be mentioned in the second point, but a lot of the time you could put the projects that you worked on, let's say if it's by a major corporation, like on your resume of like, hey, I contributed to this repository that's used by a lot of people, and it's this product or this app that is used by many. So that's also really cool. So the second benefit is that you interact with professionals. So like on GitHub or any other, software collaboration website, or a hosting service, you're going to have the ability to interact with repositories that are owned by like Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Netflix, anything like that, because these corporations have tools that are made to be open source that you're going to be contributing to, and making a lot of these choices is going to be seen by like the developers or senior engineers at this company that are going to be making contributions as well. And like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the time your contributions to these repositories are reflected within the company, and the people within the company are going to be seeing them. And then you can also put in your resume, like I mentioned earlier, which is really, really important if you want to separate yourself from like competition, because it's one thing to have, here's this app I made, or here's this website I built, or something like that, that is for your own personal gain. But, saying I've worked on this repository that's used by a lot of people, that's, different in magnitude. So it's really, really important. So what counts as contributing? So anything that adds value to a repository is a contribution in and of itself. So this means that you don't need to write code, or you don't need to have technical solutions in order to have something be deemed as like a quote unquote contribution, which is really important because some of the most effective tools for maintaining code, is having people like actively report bugs or request features like in an issue tracker, or like responding to issues that are made by the developers within the repository, because making projects more understandable to others that might not like understand it or be new to the project is the best way you could use your time. And also this isn't here, but it could also help you within your own CS classes as well, because the more you're interacting with the repository, the more you're interacting with the code base and doing like real day-to-day things of a software engineer, you could also interact with the ways in which you think within your CS classes as well, of here's this bug, how do I fix it? How do I do it in a manner that is correct and the most effective? Yeah, so what should you know before you even contribute to an open source project? So you don't need to be an expert on the code base in order to contribute to it. And by extension, you don't need to learn the entire code base. You just need to work at it, piece by piece at a time, and then incorporate your own knowledge within it as well. Because it's really important, because as I mentioned earlier, some of these repositories have like thousands of users or a ton of files or a ton of code, and it's like pretty unrealistic if you expect to like understand everything. So, take it, pace by pace, and you'll be just fine. So you also have to make sure you respect like the code of conduct found within the repository. And usually this is like in a README file, or, talking to people within like a messaging app that people use to contribute to the open source. There's like rules you have to follow, and you have to be respectful in certain manners, especially when it comes to projects that are really, really big. You can learn about, anything regarding your setup in the dev environment within the MD file. And if you have any like code specific questions that you're trying to ask, like in a GitHub discussion, you could go to like a Slack or Discord, or you could just talk to people who maintain the repository as well. And I think one of the most important things is you have to take constructive criticism politely. And like, if people have modifications to your code, or like they didn't, like how you contributed something, like that's not seen as like a personal attack or anything like that. It's just all constructive criticism that, again, you're going to be using day to day if like you're a software engineer in the industry. I'm just going to pass it to Suneet just to talk about resources and like getting into open source as well.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of people, when they're starting to get into open source, one of the biggest issues they run into is like, how do I find something to contribute to? And well, it's not the most straightforward process. There are tools out there or websites out there that can help you find places to contribute to. So I'm going to show one of these, but I'll talk about these other two here. So Open Source Guide is just pretty much a manual that can tell you how to approach open source. It's not going to tell you how to do anything concrete, but it'll give you a good understanding of what open source is about, and it'll tell you how to go about contributing. The ones that'll help you actually get to a certain repo are Good First Issue and First Timers Only. I like Good First Issue more than First Timers Only. Some people are the other way, but I find Good First Issue a lot more intuitive than the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And you can see here, it's going to give a listing of a bunch of different repositories. And what it's doing is it's going through all these repositories, and it's looking if any of their tickets in the repository are labeled Good First Issue. So if it has that label on the ticket and it's public, it'll show up in this list. So you have stuff from Svelte, where you can see some tickets that people want help with, or you can scroll down and there's a bunch of different ones, and you can even filter it by the language you're programming in. So I had one in mind that I saw earlier, and it was called Mapbox. And if we look here, there were some issues. There were some issues here, and one of them that really stuck out to me was this set image convenience method. So what I can do is I can actually just click on it here, and it's going to take me right to GitHub and right to that issue ticket. And basically they're saying they repeat this block of code a lot, and they basically just want someone to come in and turn this into a function, and then basically that's it, and then add it to the class, and then submit a pull request. So what I'm going to do is, full disclosure, I'm not an expert on this repo, and I don't claim to be one, but I just want to show that you don't have to be one to contribute. You can just take things one piece at a time, and it's fine. So the first step for me to contribute to this repo is to go ahead and click fork. And basically what fork does is it adds a copy of this repo to my account. And you'll see why that's important later. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, hold on, I need to sign in. Let me copy this link. All right, so now that I'm signed into GitHub, I'm gonna go ahead and hit fork. And then it's gonna ask me which account I want it to fork to. I'm gonna choose my personal account because I don't wanna add repos to other people's account. And then once I do that, that'll create a fork of that repo within my account. So I'm just gonna open another tab here just so I can reference the issue ticket while I work on it. Okay, and so basically they pretty much have given us the code that we need to implement. And they said that we basically need to add it to this thing called image manager. So, all right, now that I have it cloned, I need to actually start coding. So what you can do is you can just, let me share my whole screen now. You can just start up VS Code, which is my preferred editor, or any editor for that matter. And then, hold on a second. And I'm going to go to the command runner and I'm going to do git clone. And then I'm going to say clone from GitHub. And then I'm going to put my username in. And then the name of the repo, which is mapbox-gl-js. And I'll hit enter. It's going to ask me where I want to clone it. And I'll just do my home directory. And then it'll go ahead and start to clone this. And depending on how big the repo is, it might take a little longer. I'm not actually sure how big this repo is, but we'll see. Okay, it's finally cloned. So I'm just going to hit open now. And you'll see I'll have all the code that I forked from that repo. So the first thing I need to do is look back at that issue ticket and see what they're asking for. So they want this convenience method and they want it to be integrated into this image manager class. So the first thing I'll do is I'll use something called the symbolic lookup in VS Code. So I'll do image manager. Okay, well, if that's not working, then I'll do, actually, you know what I'll do? On this issue ticket, they actually give a hyperlink to where this is located. So I can actually click on this and you can see it gives me where this class is located. And I can see up here, it's in source, render, and then image manager. So I'm going to go into there, source, render, and then image manager. Okay, so we found the class. Now all we need to do is we need to add that new method in. Before I do that, if you're working on like a repo that has dependencies, I recommend, like, for example, this is using Node.js, just run the install command. So I'm going to run npm install. And this is going to install all of the software I need to actually run this. So let's see how long this takes. All right, I'm just gonna, for the sake of the demo, I'm just gonna skip out on this part, but you should do this if you're actually cloning. I'm just gonna skip to the part where we actually implement what we need to. So they didn't really say where in the file I need to put it, so I can put it anywhere. And if people have issues, they can put a comment on my pull request. So let me go back to that original issue ticket, and I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this. And there's a handy copy button right here. And then they want a method. So I need to name the method. So I have some creative freedom here. Let's see what, oh, actually they gave a name up here, set image. So let me do that. I'll do set image. And it takes an image ID. I'm going to paste the actual body into here. All right. And that's it. I've pretty much implemented this. Oops. So what I'm going to do now, hold on a second. Okay, I've implemented it here. What I'm going to do now, usually what you'll do at this point is you'll actually test your code to make sure it actually works properly. And then you're going to contribute it back. So how do you contribute it back? Well, the first thing you do is in Git, you create a new branch. So I'm going to create a branch. So Git branch, and I'm going to call it refactor/image manager. That's my branch name. I'm actually going to check out into that branch. All right. And now that I'm in my own branch, I'm going to go ahead and make a commit. So I'm going to make a message here that tells people what I actually did. So I'll do git. Actually, first, before I do that, I need to add all the files I modified. I'm pretty sure this is saved. All right. And so now what I'll do is I'll say git commit or git add all. And I'll do git commit -m for message. And I'll say refactor add new set image method. All right, that looks good. So I'll go ahead and commit that. And now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and push it to my fork that I made earlier. So I can do git push. It's going to yell at me because there's no upstream branch. So all you have to do is copy and paste this. And it will push it to that branch. And it's really nice on GitHub. It'll actually give you the link to make a pull request. So let me go here and I'll continue to GitHub. Let me quit out of this for a second. Let's try that again. Keeps logging me back out. All right, that link isn't working, but I'll just do it myself. So I'll go back to that repo I created. It was called Mapbox. So I'm going to go to my fork here. And you notice at the top, it said this branch I created had some recent pushes. And you can actually hit the button right here. It's really convenient to compare and just do a pull request. And basically, this will allow me to contribute that code back into the repo that wanted that fixed. So you can actually see all the difference you made. And this will also be used for reviewers to review your code. And usually they'll have a template like this you need to fill out. You don't always have to do it, but usually for first timers, they require it. And I'm just going to say for now closes, and then I usually put the ticket number. I believe this was something. I'm just going to put a random number in, but you'll put the ticket number it closes in here, and that way they know it'll show on the side that it's going to close that ticket. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead and hit create pull request, and then someone from the maintainers or from the repo, the maintainers will come and review your code, and they will accept or reject or either request changes to your code. And during that process, they'll suggest how to improve it. So if you go to this actual repo here and look at some of the other people's pull requests, you'll see how the process works. So this is someone who made another pull request earlier. And I don't know what it does, but you can see here, they'll review it and you can look inside and what they're asking. And they're going to say, hey, you put a typo here, and then they'll correct it. Or some other ones are, they'll basically ask you to do a more efficient way of going about things. So they'll do that. And yeah, once you submit the PR and it's accepted, it gets merged into the actual main repo and you have made your first open source contribution. So yeah.
So that's it for the demo. Do you guys have any questions regarding just like the process that he was talking about, or just something we covered in the slides?
Anyone on Zoom? Yeah, what do you want to go back to specifically?
Oh, just the process of opening.
Oh, you mean like, okay, so like, oh, into VS Code? Okay, so what I did was, first you have to fork it, and then that adds it to my account. Because you can't, well, you can clone it from directly, but you shouldn't if you want to make contributions, because you have to edit the code and you can't just edit it on their account. So you have to fork it over to your account. So we fork it, and then once it's forked, you can see it's on my account now. So like it has my name here, and then it has a repo here. So now I can do whatever I want with this and it won't affect anyone. So on VS Code, if you want to get this into your editor, you can. So there's a shortcut on Mac. It's Command-Shift-P. On Windows, it's Control-Shift-P. And when I hit that, it's going to bring up the command palette. And basically the command palette, it allows me to type any command out and it'll run it. So what I did was I typed git clone. And then I hit enter. And then there's another option to clone from GitHub, which is what I'm using. And then my repository name is right here. So I'm just going to type that in. And you can see it's right there. And basically I just clicked on that and then it did everything and then it opened it up in a new VS Code window. So yeah. Are there any other questions? Anyone on Zoom or? All right. All right, we'll end it here.
So thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.